global scientific elite systematically suppresses revolutionary knowledge. The human mind is not confined to the brain. This irrefutable truth remains obscured by decades of reductionist materialism that imprisons humanity in a fragmented view of reality. Millions live in the shadows of ignorance, while unequivocal manifestations of this universal mental connection emerge daily in their lives. That phone call that arrives at the exact moment you think of the person, the fortuitous encounter with someone essential to solving a recent problem, the recurring symbol that appears precisely when a crucial decision approaches. These are not mere statistical coincidences as they want you to believe. They are manifestations of a coded universal language that few have learned to decipher. Jung identified this phenomenon, naming it synchronicity, coincidental events connected by meaning, not by cause and effect. However, the academic establishment relegated this discovery to the margins of acceptable knowledge, treating it as a psychological curiosity without scientific relevance. Why? The answer disturbs defenders of the dominant paradigm. In an increasingly fragmented world where experts know more and more about less and less, this understanding of interconnected reality represents a fundamental threat to institutional control of knowledge. After all, what would happen if humanity realized it could directly access the universal field of information without intermediaries? Synchronicity transcends the simplistic concept of coincidence, revealing itself as an interface between individual consciousness and a cosmic informational matrix. In ancestral traditions and cutting-edge scientific discoveries, there is surprising evidence of this connection, evidence systematically ignored, distorted, or ridiculed.
Out of the matrix into prime reality. That's what we're about here. Thank you for joining us on X, Rumble, and YouTube. Do we have sound now, my friends? We should be having it. Okay, still no sound. Check 1, 2, 3. Sound is clear.
Can hear now.
Can hear now. So let's confirm. Sound is clear. Okay, good. Again, my apologies. If it ain't one thing, it's another thing. But here we are, my friends. And I believe what we're going to talk about today. No, I actually know. Spreading this awareness around the subject, today's subject, and helping more and more people comprehend this might solve one of the last mysteries. Maybe not one of the last ones, but one of the big mysteries, and putting things into a proper perspective. And the truth is, you, wherever you sit today, you might be sitting somewhere in Asia, somewhere in Europe, somewhere in Africa. It doesn't really matter. You might be disconnected from large sections of the population. You might be helping millions of people without even knowing it. There is a principle. And that principle is called consciousness compensation. Now, we've talked about this before, but never explored it in depth as we're going to today, because it might matter more than most people think. So what is this consciousness compensation thing? Let's look at this together. Consciousness compensation refers to the spiritual or energetic balancing mechanism in which higher levels of consciousness in individuals help offset, neutralize, or uplift the effects of lower levels of consciousness in the collective. In simpler terms, one person at a high level of consciousness compensates for thousands or even millions operating at lower levels. Now, this sounds kind of sort of strange. It's like people will say, I get this. If I'm out there being an activist, if I'm out there organizing and getting people together and protesting or starting movements or doing anything physically tangible, any tangible thing in the world, I get how that might affect people. But how can my consciousness balance out for other people with low levels of consciousness, and specifically if they're not even close to me? And I get that that is a valid perspective. But if we are exploring consciousness as a fundamental principle of existence, then we also have to see and feel and know that ultimately everything is truly connected. Okay? Let's dive into this a little more. This is not a metaphor, by the way. It's a literal energetic effect measured through calibrated kinesiology, and we're going to get into that a little later, and understood within the framework of nonlinear logarithmic consciousness levels. And if you look at this map here, what logarithmic means is that it gets stronger and more expanded the higher it goes. So if you look at the lower levels of consciousness, shame, guilt, fear, apathy, grief, desire, anger, pride, those are all below the sort of the universally agreed upon threshold of 200, where things begin to change on this scale. In other words, as you can see, the cone, the way that the cone is shaped is the higher up someone goes on the level of consciousness, on the scale of consciousness, the greater the effect on the whole ultimately becomes. So how can we measure consciousness? This question has been asked often. And we have to look at something called calibrated kinesiology or applied kinesiology, specifically in the quest for truth. And this is a fundamental principle that when you're dealing with any matters of consciousness, you're dealing with levels of truth. And what the ultimate highest level of consciousness is pure truth. That's nothing is higher than pure truth. It must be understood because it entails everything. Truth entails everything, unlimited. And so what Dr. Hawkins, as a modern consciousness researcher, and even if you want someone who's reached certain levels of enlightenment, has found out by testing and by exploring kinesiology in different ways, is that the human body is a binary truth detector or decoder. Believe it or not, we've tested this ourselves many times, and it is true. When exposed to truth, the body's energy field becomes coherent and strong. When exposed to falsehood, the body's field becomes incoherent and weak. This is measurable through a simple muscle test, usually the deltoid, the arm muscle. If the arm remains firm, it indicates alignment with truth or high consciousness. If the arm goes weak, it signals falsehood or low consciousness. You can see Dr. Hawkins in this image here with the little girl, and what she was doing is she was extending her arm. I'll show you this one here, basically, and there is a simple test. The person who is applying the test to that person who extends the arm will basically try to push down that arm. And in the beginning, you sort of make a sort of a default test. You just try to see if the person is strong enough to withhold that push down. It's not a strong push. It's just about seeing whether the muscle holds. And then if I were the person extending the arm, I could, for example, I could hold an object, a supplement, or any other food product. I could hold it with one arm to my chest. Solar plexus is a good region, and I would extend the other arm. And then the tester would say, hold. And if my muscle is weak while I'm holding this supplement, and sort of the arm kind of falls down, I don't have a lot of strength to push against or to hold, then that is an indicator that this particular supplement, for example, might not be the best option for me at the time. Now, you can refine these tests, and obviously you would do. It's very important how you phrase a question. It's very important the image that you hold in your mind. But ultimately, through countless double-blind studies and many control groups, it's been proven over and over again that truth can be tested, and that virtually anybody, literally anybody, can detect truth over falsehood when properly tested through muscle testing. So using this particular method of applied kinesiology, you can test for levels of consciousness. You can test for any truth or any falsehood. You can test your body on what will benefit the body or wouldn't benefit the body. Is a particular choice a good one for you or not at that time? Literally. And so this is the power of testing truth and testing consciousness. Dr. Hawkins, and many of you have read Power versus Force or Truth versus Falsehood and his other books. He developed this famous map of consciousness, which supposedly we're not even allowed to say on an open platform. I don't know, some copyright deal, but we're still saying it because I think it's got to be credited for it. Assigning these values, like I said before, the values or assigning logarithmic values to certain levels, like emotions, for example, fear, love, shame. You can do it with people. You can do it with concepts, books, movies, institutions. Our friends over at FLFE, for example, they will measure the level of consciousness of a podcast, of a book, of a movie, of anything that comes their way, and they will say, well, this book calibrates really high, or this podcast calibrates really low, by testing it. Literally using this applied kinesiology and then testing what the level of consciousness is. And now, of course, that varies. And in any given podcast, you might have 2 or 3 people in it, and all of that can be taken into account and actually measured. Now, each number on this scale of consciousness represents the frequency or vibrational level of consciousness. Below 200, it's force, ego, suffering. It's basically what the human existence has been for the vast majority of history. And then above 200, which is power, integrity, truth, courage, love, joy, unconditional love, and then the quote-unquote enlightenment states, which are 600 to 700 plus. So everything above 600 really gets into beautiful, very coherent, harmonious levels of consciousness. Now, the fundamental principle here is that consciousness is itself is a non-local and connected to is a non-local field and connected to the universal mind. So what we're basically dealing with as human beings, we are individual units of consciousness. You might look at it that way. We are, an IUC, an individual unit of consciousness. And while we are connected to the whole and to the, the universal mind, if you will, we still have an individual expression of that, right? It's like you look at the huge ocean, like look at the huge Pacific Ocean, for example. You could be on one end of that ocean and it's completely calm. And then on the other end, there's waves. Now, those waves still belong to the same ocean, but they're obviously individual expressions of that ocean rising higher and lower, or currents. And so you have, it's sort of a metaphor for how individual consciousness might work. And because of this, muscle testing taps into a field of absolute truth beyond the personal mind. So we're basically able to use the body and use the muscles to test whether something is true, because it is ultimately connected to that universal mind. So we're getting into this so we can explain how consciousness compensation works and how you might be helping millions of people. We have to sort of grasp this entire concept here. The map of consciousness is, like I said, logarithmic. Remember, it's this cone. So basically, the higher up you go on the scale, the bigger your impact, if you will, the greater the power that you exude into the world. And so a person at the level of 500 has 10 times the power of a person at 400. And those are both fairly high levels of consciousness. For example, the FLFE service, which, you know, we recommend to our viewers with all our hearts, maintains a field, a consciousness field around a home or a business or a person of approximately 550 or a little above at all times. That doesn't mean the person itself is at 550 at all times, but the field in which a person is at 550. So that is a very powerful field. A person at level 600, which is the equivalent of true peace, has 1,000 times the power of someone at 500. Now think about this. If somebody is at love 500 and somebody is at peace, that jump of 100 points on that scale equals 1,000 times more power. Now, again, this has been measured. This has been tested, double-blind studies. This is real research that's behind this. And this exponential energy scale is why one truly enlightened being calibrating at 700 plus can compensate for the negativity of millions at lower levels, 200 and below. This is the true power, and this is the true conversation here. Compensating for something means that there's something bad that might be happening here, but there's something really good that's happening here. And because of this field that connects everything, there is a compensation that happens. It balances things out. And if we don't take this into account, we will despair because we think we don't have any power and we can't change things that are seemingly far bigger than us. Systems, governments, militaries, organized crime, abuse and suffering, you name it. The individual expression of consciousness, the individual unit of consciousness, which is us, we feel incredibly small compared to the problems of the world. And often people despair because they think, what could I possibly do? Well, let me read this to you again. A person at level 600, which is peace, has 1,000 times the power of someone at 500. And somebody who calibrates at 700 plus on this consciousness scales is actually basically compensating for the negativity of millions of people in this world. Think about the consequences of this for a moment. Think about the incredible message that this sends in the field, into the field. Which means we're balancing the Earth's field every single day. The power of one person at level 700. Listen, this is what they calibrated. This is what they calculated through numerous tests. The power of one person at level 700 counterbalances 70 million people below level 200. 70 million. One person. This is incredible. And it's, you know, it's also the only logical explanation. There's no other logical explanation in the world today as to why we are not already in a massive global conflict, given the atmosphere, given the messaging, given the psychological operations. There's only one logical explanation, which the mainstream will never talk about, which they don't want you to know about, because this is the ultimate liberation key, because it tells us in no uncertain terms that we do not have to wait for anything or anyone or anyone's circumstance, and that it is beyond money, finance, force, control, government, or any other form of self-appointed authority to stop this from happening. It's impossible. It's impossible to stop this from happening if people realize it's possible, if people know what exactly their elevated level of consciousness can do in the world. This means that advanced And I will quickly explain what I mean by advanced spiritual beings. But this means that advanced spiritual beings aren't just at peace, they're performing an invisible service to humanity simply by existing. And, you know, I'm very cautious about two things here, saying two things that we're not actually saying. Number one, what is an advanced spiritual being? There's really in my book, that is just a metaphor for someone who lives a self-actualized life, who knows who they are on all levels. It's just someone who's actually complete or more complete versus someone who's still more fragmented in their awareness and consciousness. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that those people are somehow special or they were born different or have a different genetic makeup. It simply means that they have worked on harmonizing all of their parts and pieces, healed what needed healing, and are coming back to a state of natural coherence. That's what that means in my book. So that's what advanced spiritual being means. It's actually just a full human being on all levels. And then the other thing is this, you know, oftentimes sort of brings people into, oh, so we don't need to do anything. Well, you know, if it wasn't for Dr. Hawkins studying this, testing this, writing books about it, putting out lectures, and teaching the world about these principles, we wouldn't know about it. So he did something, right? So literally, he did it. He took action to help people see this. And so are we today by, you know, sort of bringing to the public what the guy has discovered and reintroducing it to maybe a new generation of seekers and viewers. We're all in this chain doing something, but it isn't, as always, the doing itself that's most important. It is who we are while we're doing it. And that's exactly the message that Dr. Hawkins put out into the world. There's a critical threshold, like I said earlier, that's the level of 200. Below 200, consciousness is dominated by force, fear, shame, guilt, and control. It's where all the shit happens. It's where this, you know, this entire realm has been operating, is at or below 200 for a very long time. Above 200, consciousness begins to operate on power, integrity, and truth. This is the famous statement, power versus force. Below 200, force. Above 200, we're stepping into true power. So we naturally have. People living below 200 tend to drain collective energy while those above contribute. Therefore, consciousness compensation is the result of people above 200 uplifting the field. So literally, if you want to, you know, look at this as above 200, we are sort of pulling everything up, and below 200, everything is being pulled down, right? This is how this operates. And you know where you're, when you're in the presence of someone who is at or below 200, it doesn't feel good. There's no movement forward with that person. It's very egotistical. It's aggressive. It's just not something even remotely pleasant. Let's move forward here. Dr. Hawkins emphasized the greatest service to humanity is to raise your own level of consciousness. And I agree with that 100%. This counters the belief that activism or action is always required. In his view, silent inner work has a profound ripple effect even without external recognition. And so this is sort of where we, you know, where we step into this field where everybody has an effect. Whether they want to believe it or not does not matter. Whether they can imagine it doesn't matter. It's still happening. And to me, the most important message is that there are more and more people in the world today becoming aware or already have been aware of the greater truths, of the maybe the sort of the reality of this world as it presents itself today. And there are those who can see it, those who know that love is an answer, that peace and harmony is part of the answer, that our inner work is part of the answer, but they miss that piece of how it actually affects the world. How can I, sitting in my own apartment or house or garden, meditating or being in a high vibrational state, possibly change things that are happening on the other side of the world? Well, you are. We are. There's a ripple effect that goes through the field of consciousness. If you drop a rock into the ocean, that little effect, that ripple, it plays out. The butterfly effect, you might have heard of that too. It's the flap of the wings of a butterfly. Who would think that that has an effect on something happening on the other side of the world? But it does, my friends. It truly does. If you're operating from 500, you radiate healing, energy, calm fields, and increased coherence. So, 200 is a big threshold. 500 is a big threshold. When you get to the level of love, something begins to shift. When you stay at that level for a while, something begins to really shift. And when you can sort of in increments go higher and higher, the big shifts start to happen. 540, joy. Your presence alone can transform spaces. A person embodying the consciousness levels of 700 to 1,000 becomes a silent stabilizer in the collective field by simply being. Their inner clarity radiates outward, subtly shifting the energetic balance for countless others. It's about changing their state, and the world responds. And here I want to, and these are my own thoughts. This is not Dr. Hawkins. This is just me. The world has been waiting for 2,000 plus years, or 2,000 years, for the return of Christ, the return of the Savior. And a large section of the world, Christian believers, believe that the return of that person will be the salvation. And the question is, how can one man, one woman, one person have that effect? And I've often stated that it isn't the man in the flesh or the woman in the flesh that needs to return, but that it is our awareness of Christ consciousness, which is between 700 and 1,000 on the scale. It's our awareness and our own alignment, our own raising of our own levels to that is to return. That's what this was about. It is us knowing this and aspiring to bring all the pieces in ourselves to the greatest level of harmony possible. And then, sort of ironically, we have that effect just by being in this realm on hundreds of millions of people around us. And there's sort of a, there's this idea, and I don't believe that the world can fully be changed, or the processes in this world, or everything can be stopped without physical action. I don't think so. I think, self-actualized people will have to step into action. But I can tell you this, without that self-actualization, without that raising of consciousness on the scale, without vibrating much, much higher, on a collective level, none of those physical actions will stick. None of those changes will do much of anything, because they will be birthed from lower levels of thinking and feeling, anger, aggression, vengeance, shame, guilt. Whatever comes from that, it will just be another ripple effect to something similar. And so us rising higher is and always has been the answer. And you know this. You could simply be in the presence of a highly conscious individuals, and you can feel emotional calm, even though you were distressed before. You can feel sort of a resolution of conflict or confusion, even physical healing effects without touch or intention. Who hasn't experienced this? Maybe this was your grandmother or grandfather. Maybe it was a stranger, or maybe it was someone that your family knew, but there was something about their presence. Whenever they stepped into a room, or you stepped into a room where they were, no matter what was going on with you, no matter how you felt, you started feeling better just by being with them. Or, they came into your house to visit for the weekend, maybe a favorite relative or friend. And once they were there, things started getting better. conversations started getting better. The mood level goes up, the joy level goes up. Everybody feels, sort of lighter and inspired. And that is a higher level of consciousness. And that is proof. It's 100% evidence that there is a compensation effect going on. Imagine if this could be known and comprehended and embodied by even thousands of people, not millions, just thousands who focus on that, who realize that it is an ultimate responsibility to be the best possible version of ourselves we can be, as it literally changes the field that everybody lives in. The mere presence of someone at a high level can uplift everyone in a room without a word being spoken. I've experienced this many, many times. Places where advanced spiritual figures lived or meditated, sacred sites, pilgrimage sites, retain a measurable field of peace or power long after they're gone. Visitors often report feeling overwhelmed with peace, tears, or awe. You might have experienced this. You go, it can be a natural site. That's just known for high energy. It can be a temple, special temple that, a lot of wonderful, beautiful prayers and meditations have happened. And you go there and you can just experience it. Even healing happens there. Sudden clarity, deep emotion release. These are forms of residual consciousness fields, which continue to influence those who come into contact with them. Now, knowing all of this has been one of the fundamental reasons why we have suggested to our viewers and everyone we know and paid it forward to our families and friends, why I've suggested that people, in addition to doing all the inner work, the healing, the meditation and prayer work, activate and keep that high consciousness field through the FLFE service, because these folks, all of their work is birthed from the comprehension and the studying of the work of people like David Hawkins, measuring this, testing this. This is why we're so, why we're so passionate about talking about FLFE, because it's literally one of the most beautiful services in the world today. That's why we always say, just go and give it a try, test it. It will help you on this journey, but it is not, let me make this clear, it is neither a requirement nor is it in any way, shape, or form necessary for you to raise your own level of consciousness. I would never say that, because that would be complete bullshit. It's not a requirement. It's not necessary. It's a support field. So I want to make that clear, but it is a wonderful support field. With that, I would like to open this conversation up for a few questions, a little bit of an open Q&A here. This is... Yeah, please put all questions in all caps so they're easier to spot. Christine will spot them. But this is one of my absolutely favorite things to think about, explore, talk about. And I would encourage you all to look up, if you haven't yet, Dr. David Hawkins' work and others in the field, to study kinesiology, how it works, the muscle testing thing, and applied kinesiology, how you can calibrate, how you can test yourself, how you can use simple muscle tests to measure truth or benefit to you. It's a game changer. It sort of often takes out the guesswork, right? And we might intuitively feel something, but sometimes we're off. Sometimes we're not fully there. Our body can always tap into the truth, which is a very powerful thing. All righty, Phoenix. What I want to know is, does this service interfere or interact with our biosignals? So if we're talking about the FLFE service, the FLFE service is a, first of all, the underlying or the amplifying technology, I should say, is a Tesla-inspired technology, but it is basically a collection of thousands of programs that have been calibrated, first tested, amplified, calibrated. So what that means is the field itself communicates with everything within the field, but only and only with the active agreement. There has to be an active agreement. You can't just be forced to experience what is in this field. You have an active agreement, you choose it, but then it optimizes everything that is in the field. It optimizes all the processes in your body. It helps the body remember by simply calibrating the field to truth. And so your body is now in a field of truth. So even though it might have been confused or more confused, it starts to move more towards truth. So everything that was sort of out of whack starts to become more balanced. It is subtle and it works over time, but that's why people have experiences where they, when they're in the field for a little bit, they will start having some effects. Some people have detox effects. It's a good thing, but it's not very pleasant. It might be headache or diarrhea or whatever. That can happen for a little while because your body is calibrating more towards its truth. It's the processes are becoming to get harmonized. So yes, there is an interaction, but it is very important to know that how this field was created or infused is the highest process of integrity that I've ever seen. That's how beautifully inspired these folks are that are creating these programs for that field. And there's sort of Christine and I wouldn't stand behind it the way that we are if we weren't 100% not just convinced, but know on every level that this is for the highest benefit of the human family. Otherwise, we would never, ever recommend it. How do you stop energy vampires? It's very simple. What made you allow them in the first place? You have to know nothing comes without your consent. It might be implied, it might be given without you knowing this, but you've at some point given consent to this. You've opened yourself up to this. This is not a judgment. It's not pointing fingers. We all did at some point. Everybody has had that experience. So we have to become conscious about our energetic choices. And what does that mean? Well, we have a field around us, right? Everybody has. That field is both radiating outwards and it's also serving as sort of a protective shield if we want it to. We can program what comes through that field or not. Does it always work 100%? I wouldn't say so, because we would have to be working with it all the time, but we can set basic standards where we say anything that seeks to drain my energy, anything that seeks to take more from me than it is willing to give, I don't allow it. That's not coming through. I only allow things into my experience that are beneficial for me and the whole, if you will, or all that is. I'm only allowing things that increase my energy levels, not deplete them. You can literally create your own programs like that. And when you close your eyes and set that intention and imagine that that field around you, you give it instructions because it is an information field. It is reacting to your instructions because you are the originator of that field. So that's how you can set those standards. And then what is highly important is that you embody those standards, embody the boundaries that you set. Now you've set those boundaries. Now they're in the energetic field. Now embody them, which is reaffirming them until they become a truth. Once they become a truth, in other words, once you fully embody them, you don't just believe, but you know that's who you are. Those people will start falling away from your life. In other words, you won't have to actively sort of push them out anymore. They won't come any longer. And that's what starts to happen over time. It doesn't happen overnight, but it starts to happen over time.
Did you see the Empire?
I just answered that.
Oh, there are so many questions and so many. I'm sorry. There you go.
Healing with the diamonds. Is this the be like a child quote? Natural higher frequency. Yeah, well, it's sort of, that used to be more of a universal truth. Today, I'm not so sure anymore. Children are, they're being, children grow in low energetic bodies. I'm sorry to say it, in low vibing motherly bodies. They were co-created by low vibing parents. So not every child is, sort of a natural high vibing being. That's a romanticized image. But children that were, and not every child that comes through low energetic beings is automatically a low energetic being. But you sort of have to observe, I think, the child that is unburdened, the child that stays connected, the child that has a lot of purity left. Oh yeah, be like that child for sure. That they they have remembered more and forgotten less. So we're walking through life relearning all these things if we lost that connection, remembering, and the child who's pure hasn't. So yeah, I mean, if you find such a child or have it, that's a wonderful teacher. Catching Sunrise, how would you handle people that chase truth but never really live truth? Not at all. I wouldn't handle them at all. And I've become extremely discerning like that. And this is perhaps something, how do I put this? For example, I don't waste time talking about big picture stuff with small-minded people. And it's not that I judge them for it. It's just, why would I waste my time talking about something that never leads anywhere? A good conversation, for example, is an upward spiral. A really good conversation, even if it is about a difficult topic, it is like a ping pong game that keeps getting higher and higher and higher, and it just becomes this beautiful thing. A conversation that is on a downward spiral is a conversation I end within 3 to 5 minutes or less. I've gotten really good at 1 minute now. If I know this is where the conversation is going, I'm out of there. I don't give a fuck. And that's how I've become, because we don't have the luxury of that time any longer. So it's not for me to judge them. It's not for me to tell them they're wrong or they should do different things. I simply walk away. And that's how I do it, good or bad, but that's how I do it. Do you believe if you raise your frequency, you raise your consciousness? Well, how would you define the difference? When we speak in human terms, we sort of we find the highest correlation between terms that we can find and how they represent each other. So I don't see how a higher frequency could have a lower consciousness. But in the end, these are words and terms that if you talk to a mainstream physicist, frequency might have a vastly different meaning than if you talk to someone who's more on the spiritual quantum physics level. That will have a different. So, and I'm neither of those. I'm trying to find the best terms that describe what something does when it vibrates higher. Everything becomes better. Thomas, my friend, when honest with ourselves, inside and out, we cannot be lied to. How do you reckon we encourage that? Well, that's the statement of the day, I would say. That, the first thing of any type of work that you do is you have to be willing to look at every single one of your blind spots. It doesn't mean you can fix all of them all at once. Not at all. But just be willing to see them and stop pretending they're not there, or stop pretending that just because you rephrased something or reframed it in your mind, that the thing itself was changed. Everybody lies to themselves at some point, and most people lie to themselves all the time. That's why they can lie to others. When you're really honest with yourself, really truthful, you call yourself out on your own bullshit, you become, not because you want to, you by default become a truth speaker. It just means when you open your mouth, it's either true or you don't open your mouth at all. But you're not willing to lie, not to others, not to yourself. And that journey also means that you know, people say, oh, I had a pretty good childhood. You know, it was beautiful. And then the more you talk, the more you realize nothing was really all that beautiful. There were beautiful moments, there were beautiful periods, but their childhood as a collective was like filled with tragedy and abuse. You just saying it was a beautiful childhood does not make that go away. The energy of that childhood is still there. So you being honest with yourself and saying, okay, let's be honest here, this is how it really was, allows you to actually look at that truth and say, I'm willing to release that now. I'm willing to transcend that with love. I'm even willing to forgive if necessary for my own sake. Unless that honesty happens, you have no chance. So Thomas, that's a fantastic point. You know, honesty with yourself is like the prerequisite for anything truthful in the world. Silver Sage, when you first noticed your vibration, how many people left your life that were in lower vibrations? I'm losing friendships and bringing new ones who seem more in alignment. It's very cool. This is a fantastic question because it literally affects everyone in this conversation here and everyone that's watching. So Christine and I were, we had our own little bubble from the beginning, you know, we had our own little bubble, but we were also existing within a much bigger bubble of very standard friendships, acquaintances that you might, you know, sort of the things that the world consists of. And we noticed that, you know, once or twice a week when we would get together and have dinners and whatnot, it would be that draining experience, right? Because most of it was happening below 200 or just around 200, and we didn't measure it at the time, we just felt it. So we simply made the decision that we were not going to sort of subject ourselves to that any longer. It just wasn't in service of anyone or anything. And so we made a conscious decision. We started staying away. And there was a time of not isolation, but very few social contacts, you know, and that has to be okay, right? And that was okay. But like you so beautifully say, if you don't despair and simply stay in that, you know, where you are in your level, interestingly enough, you could be out in the boonies and, you know, see 5 people a week, but, you know, 2 of them might just be the right people for you at that time, and you form new friendships. And so, yes, we have over the years completely changed our friendship circle. And today it's like, you know, when somebody reaches out or we reach out to someone, it's people whom we truly love and are not always of the same opinion, by the way, but whom we align with on an energetic level, you know, in a beautiful way. And that's really what matters most. DJ Wiz, is this the transition from 3D to 5D? Meaning those who resonate at this vibrational level of consciousness will transcend the matrix. I don't know. You know, I really don't know. All I can say is that every time that you leap, you start, and, you know, whenever you leap, it doesn't mean you stay at that level. You know, you can have experiences in life pull you down for a little bit, but usually what happens, a real leap to me, is when you raise the ground level, right? When you raise the level below which you don't fall anymore. That's where it gets interesting. And every time you do that, you transcend a layer of the falsehood. Like, you yourself live in a different sphere, even though the walls around you still might look the same, but you live in a different sphere. It's almost like you're going into a different dimension that is more suitable to where you are. So in a sense, maybe more metaphorically speaking, yes, but I don't know this, you know, this classic 3D to 5D and what people call that. I don't subscribe to these numbers or particulars so much as I do to the bigger principles. So short of the long of it here is, I don't know. Second part question: how does it impacts people's free will who may want to take the blue pill and not want to level up by your 700 plus vibes. Nothing can counteract free will. You know what I mean? Think about it this way. Would you say that somebody is messing with your free will? Okay, I'm gonna give you an example. You are pumped up, you're fired up. You've had a shitty morning. 7 people cut you off in traffic. Somebody threatened you, and you're just you're in warrior mode. Okay, you want to hit something or someone. You just feel that way. Okay, and everybody's had that. So you're in fighting mode, and now you walk into a room. And you didn't know it before, but there's 3 people sitting there that are like, they're just peace. They're just harmony. I mean, everything about them, it's just radiating harmony. Within a few minutes, you're calm. Like you don't know what happened, but that rage is gone. That anger is gone. You just go, was somebody working against your free will here? Didn't you use your free will to walk into that space? Didn't you open the door and walk through it? Didn't you put yourself in that environment? So you see what I mean by that is the field, you still have to interact with the field. You still have to be a conscious interactor with the field. And so free will is not counteracted in my book by the field itself, because it's the stuff that you're truly made of anyways. So, you know, maybe that example sort of clarifies where I stand on this, but I don't think this is working against free will. Is there a way to naturally create the same field? Yes, of course. That's been the story from the beginning. When I talk about, for example, the FLFE field, this is a support system, and it's a temporary one. It won't be needed forever. It's for the very phase that we're in, a very, very beautiful support system. But neither will we need these screens forever, or these phones or whatever. All of these things are, maybe we can use them as transitional tools in their own way. But yeah, right now, I would say if you wanted a consistent field in your home, in your environment, of let's say 550, 500 to 550, love, joy, somewhere there, I would say you would have to invest 4 to 6 hours a day at least, and probably not alone. Would be good to meditate with 2 or 3 others, or pray at that level for 4 to 6 hours a day to keep that field going, and at the same time also counteract the negative impacts from the land, the property, the memory of the land, you know, sort of. So that is entirely possible, and people are doing it. People are doing it all over the world. It's just their lives, their days, their actions are adjusted to that. Most of the Western, or most of the people that live in an economized society simply do not have the luxury of that time to invest in that, but it is absolutely 100% possible. Last one. Grierson, my friend, it's good to see you. Can we absorb dark energy and turn it into light energy? Well, we're getting into a field here that I don't like to discuss publicly. I won't answer that question here. I will answer it in another form, in a different way. But this is so we're getting to the thick of it here. So you know, on locals, I will answer this, not fully, but enough, but not here. This is sort of it's behind a different door. That's all I'm going to say. All right, my friends. Thank you for joining us here. Thank you for tuning in. This is, like I said, probably one of the most exciting things we could possibly share with each other and talk about what we could do, what we could talk to the world about. Because I don't care if you're a liberal, if you're a conservative, if you're non-political, if you're this or that. This affects everyone. This unites us, because we truly are of one underlying energy. This unites us, and the more we talk about this, the higher the level of consciousness. So I can tell you one thing. We're at the end of the show today, 54 minutes in. I can tell you 100% that if I had our friends measure this with their calibrations, they would go, the show continually went up and up and up in consciousness. It started pretty good already, but we went up and up and up. We up-leveled here, my friends. And that's the entire goal. Much love to you all. Many blessings, and we'll be back with you again very, very soon.
Listen, right now you could be only a few clicks away from experiencing something amazing, something that has changed thousands of lives all over the world. I'm talking about a high consciousness field similar to those at pilgrimage sites and sacred places. It's where people go to heal, to connect, and to become the best possible version of themselves. With FLFE, you can bring such a high consciousness field into your home right now. It's a spiritual quantum technology based on the work of Nikola Tesla. Better sleep, more energy, greater well-being, improved finances, electrosmog mitigation. These are only some of the things people on the FLFE service are experiencing. Try it now for 15 days completely free of charge, no credit card needed. Just click on a link down below to start your free, no strings attached FLFE trial right now.